Welcome once again to today's class. We are continuing on our series on fractions. In our previous class, we've seen what fractions are. We've also seen the different types of fractions. We've looked at how to add fractions, subtract fractions, multiply fractions, and divide fractions. In today's class, we'll be looking at how to convert fractions to decimals and how to convert decimals to fractions. Also, we'll look at how to convert fractions to percentage and how to convert percentage to fractions. Okay, so let's start. So we are starting with converting fractions to decimals. Whenever you are given a fraction and you're expected to convert it to a decimal, all you need to do is apply long division. Okay, so if you know how to do long division, you will easily be able to convert from fractions to decimal. So that's the first thing we're going to look at, converting fractions to decimal. Let's look at the example. So we'll start with something very easy. So let's convert 1/2 to decimal. So let's convert 1/2 to decimal. I said earlier that we're going to use long division. So here we're going to have 1, which is the numerator, will be inside, and 2, which is the denominator, will be outside. Okay, so this means 1 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2. Okay, so if you have 1 divided by 2, we cannot have a whole number, okay, because 1 is less than 2. So for us to continue with the process of division, we have to convert 1 to become a number that is bigger than 2. And for us to do that, we simply need to add 0 to 1. Initially, there was no 0 here, but for us to make 1 to be bigger than 2, we only need to add 0 here. So once you add 0, we now have 10. So 10 is now bigger than 2. But we manipulated. 0 was not there at the beginning. We just introduced 0. So for us to balance what we've done, we also have to write 0 point. So this is where our answer is supposed to be. So since we introduced a 0 that was not there, to balance it out, we need to write 0 point over here. Okay? Else, if we don't write 0 point, then the answer we are going to get is going to be a whole number and not a decimal. Okay, so now we can do 10 divided by 2. 10 divided by 2. 10 divided by 2 is going to give us 5. So now we have 5 times 2 will give us 10. So we can subtract. 10 minus 10 will give us 0. So once we get 0, we've come to the end of the process. So at this point, what will be our decimal? Our decimal is going to be this number here. So that number there is our decimal. Our decimal equivalent of 1/2. So this means 1/2 is equal to 0.5. Okay, 1/2 is equal to 0.5. It is very easy to convert a fraction to a decimal. So we've looked at the first example. Let's consider another example. 3/4. 3/4. Okay, so let's look at this. We are doing 3 divided by 4. So just as we did, the numerator is inside, the denominator is outside. Okay, 3 divided by 4. So just as we experienced in the last example, 3 is smaller than 4. So we cannot divide 3 by 4 and get a whole number. So we need to find a way of increasing 3 to become a number bigger than 4. Just as we did in the first example, we introduced 0 to it. So once you introduce 0 to 3, it becomes 30, and now it is bigger than 4. But to compensate for that, we're going to do 0 point. Okay? So now 30 divided by 4, we are going to have 7, because 4 times 7 is 28. So we're going to have 7. We cannot have 8 because 4 times 8 is 32, and 32 is bigger than 30. Okay. So now we have 7 times 4, 28. 30 minus 28 will give us 2. So now we have another situation where we have a number that we want to divide by 4, but this number is less than 4. So are we expected to put another 0 here? No. So if you put another 0 here and then put 0 here, you'll be wrong. Okay? So although we're going to put a 0 here to make 2 to be bigger than 4, because 2 now becomes 20, we are not going to put any 0 here. This 0 was introduced to show that the answer is going to be a number less than 1. So now with this 0, we are going to have 0 point something, which is a number less than 1. But since we already have the number less than 1, we don't need to put any other 0 where we are putting 0 here. Okay? So now we have 20 divided by 4, we have 5. 5 times 4, 20. 20 minus 20 will give you 0. Correct? Okay? So the answer will now be 3 all over 4 is equal to 0.75. So we have been able to convert these fractions to decimal. Now we want to look at a situation where we are working with an improper fraction. 15 over 10. This is also simple. 15 over 10. So this is an improper fraction because the numerator is larger than the denominator. So we have 15 inside and 10 outside. So if we say 15 divided by 10, how many 10 can we find in 15? 10 times 1, 10, 10 times 2, 20. So it is just 1 10 that can be found in 15 because 10 times 1 is 10. When you do 10 times 2, you will get a number larger than 15. So we just have 1. 1 times 10 is 10. So 15 minus 10, this will give us 5. So at this point, 5 divided by 10 is not possible because 5 is smaller than 10. So just as we did in our previous example, we are going to put 0 here so that this number will be bigger than 10. And then when we come to this point, we are not going to put 0 point because we already have a number. This number here, 1, is already existing. So we are not putting 0 point, we are just putting point. Okay? So we're just putting point. So now we can do 50 divided by 10, which will give us 5. 5 times 10, 50. 50 minus 50, 0. So this means 15 over 10 is equal to 1.5. 28 over 5. So this is another improper fraction because the numerator is larger than the denominator. 28 inside and 5 outside. So here we have 28 divided by 5. So how many 5 can we find in 28? 5 times 1, 5. 5 times 2, 10. 5 times 3, 15. 5 times 4, 20. 5 times 5, 25. 5 times 6, 30. So 30 is bigger than this. So we are stopping at 5 times 5, which is 25. So 5 times 5 gives us 25. And then 28 minus 25 gives us 3. Correct? 28 minus 25 gives us 3. So 3 times 5 is not possible. It's not possible. So we have to introduce a decimal. Sorry, we have to introduce 0 here and put a decimal here. So 30 divided by 5 gives us 6. 6 times 5 gives us 30. So 30 minus 30 gives us 0. Okay. So that means 28 all over 5 is equal to 5.6. That becomes the answer, 5.6. Okay, so I'd like you guys to try this one. Classwork. Okay, so try these questions. Let's see what the answer will be. So we've seen how to convert from fractions to decimal. Now we want to look at how to convert from decimals to fraction. Okay, so to convert decimals to fraction, all we need to do is move the decimal point to the right end of the decimal. That converts it to a whole number, but to compensate for that movement, we have to divide by a multiple of 10, depending on how many times we had to move the decimal point. Okay, so we're going to look at some examples. So let's convert to fractions. Let's look at the first one. A, 0.5, B, 0.75, C, 3.2, and D, 0.075. So we are converting these values to fractions. So let's start with the first one. The first one is A, 0.5. Excuse me. So when you want to convert this decimal to fraction, all you need to do is this decimal point that's here, you have to move it to the end, this right end, not the left end, the right end. So when you move it to the end, it becomes a whole number. But to compensate for that movement, you have to divide that whole number by a multiple of 10, depending on how many times you moved. So if you move from here, now this number is now a whole number 5. 0.5, because the decimal point has moved to this side, we now have a whole number 5. Remember, every whole number has a decimal point at its end. But since the decimal point is at the end, there's no need to write it down. Okay? So once you move the decimal point this way, this decimal becomes a whole number. But to compensate for that movement, you divide this whole number by a multiple of 10, depending on how many times you moved. So since we moved once, we're going to divide by 10. Okay? If you moved twice, you're going to divide by 10 times 10. If you moved 3 times, you're going to divide by 10 times 10 times 10. So now, instead of having 0.5, you now have 5 over 10. And this 5 over 10, you can break it down to its simplest form. In our previous lesson, we've seen how to break down a fraction to its simplest form. So 5 over 10, what can divide both 5 and 10? 5 can divide. 5 divided by 5, 1. 10 divided by 5, 2. So we have 1 over 2. So we've been able to convert this decimal to a fraction. Let's look at the second example. We have be 0.75. 0.75. So we want to convert 0.75 to become a fraction. So here we have the decimal point here, but we need to move this decimal point from where it is to the end. Let me make it more prominent. We need to move the decimal point from where it is to the end. So let's see how many times we're going to move it. We're going to move it 1, 2. So we've moved it twice to make it come to the end. Okay? So since we move it twice, it has become a whole number. What is the whole number? 75. Divided by how many times did we move? We moved twice. So since we moved twice, we're going to divide it by 10 times 10. So if you divide it once, if you moved once, you divide it by 10. If you move twice, you divide it by 10 times 10. If you move 3 times, you divide it by 10 times 10 times 10. And we know that 10 times 10 is 100. So this is 75 all over 100. We can break down 75 all over 100 to its simplest form. What can divide both 75 and 100? 25 can divide both of them. We can start from 5, but just to save time, can you make it 100? Yeah, this is 100, if that's what you're asking. So if we divide 75 by 25, you're going to have 3. If you divide 100 by 25, you're going to have 4. So this means our final answer will be 3 over 4. So let's continue. Let's go to C. C will have 3.2, and we're expected to convert. Okay, we're expected to convert 3.2 to fraction. So just as we move the decimal point in other cases, we also have to move this to the right end. So let's do that. So we have to move once, and just by moving it one time, we are already at the end. So since we moved it once, we are going to have the whole number here is going to be 32. 32. So how many times did we move it? We moved it once. We only moved the decimal point once. And since we moved it only once, we're going to divide by 10. So what is here, what you put here, depends on how many times you moved the decimal point. Why is it 32? The number here is 3, the number here is 2. So once the decimal point crosses, these two numbers are now together, 32. Here, when it went that way, it's now 0.75. And 0.75 is the same thing as 75. So since it was a 0, there was no need to write it. But if it is another number, you have to write that number. Okay. So now we have 32 divided by 10. So we can break this down to its simplest form. Looking at this fraction, 2 can divide both 32 and 10. So if 2 divides 32, we have 16. If 2 divides 10, we have 5. So our answer becomes 16 over 5, which is an improper fraction. Okay, so we go to the last one. So let's look at D, 0.075. 0.075. So in this case, we still have to move the decimal point to the end. But let's see how many times we need to move the decimal point. 1, 2, 3. So we need to move this decimal point 3 times. So since we are moving it 3 times, we are going to have 75. So you can see that these numbers are 0, so there's no need to put them. We only wrote the non-zero digits, 75. So since we moved it 3 times, we're going to divide by 10 times 10 times 10. Because each step is 10. The next step is times 10. The next step is times 10. So That means we are dividing by 1,000, so 75 over 1,000. 25 can divide both 75 and 1,000. Thank you. Okay, so thanks, yeah. So 25 can divide both 75 and 1,000. When 75 is divided by 25, we have 3. And when 1,000 is divided by 25, we have 40. So our answer becomes 3 over 40. That becomes the final answer. Okay, so now we've seen how to convert from fraction to decimal. We've seen how to convert from decimals back to fraction. So because of our time, I will not bother to give classwork on this one. I'll leave the classwork at the end of I'll leave the classwork at the end of the class. Okay, so let's look at how to convert fractions to percentage and how to convert percentage to fractions. Converting fraction to percentage and percentage to fraction. So let's convert fractions to percentage. So to convert fractions to percentage, all we need to do is multiply the fractions by 100. To convert fractions to percentage, all we need to do is multiply the fraction by 100 and then simplify the fraction. Okay, so let's look at an example. Convert the following to percentage. A. Okay, so I said for you to convert fractions to percentage, all you need to do is multiply by 100. So let's look at A. We have 1 over 2 times 100. 1 over 2 times 100. So remember, 100 has an invisible denominator of 1. So this will give us 1 times 100 is 100. 2 times 1 is 2. So 100 divided by 2 is going to give us 50. So we can call it 50%. Correct. So this is a simple way of converting a fraction to a percentage. Let's look at the next one. We're running out of time. B. 3 over 4. We want to convert 3 over 4 to percent or percentage. We multiply by 100. So 3 times 100 gives us 300. And 1 times 4, 4 times 1 gives us 4. So 300 divided by 4 is going to give us 75. So we have it as 75%. Okay, let's look at C. Probably you're talking about C. C, we have 12 over 20 times 100. Okay. So we can just cancel out this. 20 here, 1. 20 here, 5. So we have 12 times 5, which gives us a correct 60%. 60%. That's good. Well done. 60%. When converting from fractions to percentage, you multiply by 100. When converting from percentage to fractions, you are going to divide by 100. So let's do that. So converting percentage to fraction, you divide by 100. Okay, so let's convert these numbers in percentage to fractions. So we have 45%. So converting it to fraction, all you need to do is this number divided by 100. So we have 45. So once you do this, you have already gotten a fraction. This is already a fraction. The only thing is the next thing you need to do is break it down to its lowest term. So looking at 45 and 100, 5 can divide both 45 and 100. So 45 divided by 5 will give you 9. 100 divided by 5 will give you 20. So this means the lowest term of this is 9 over 20. That becomes the answer. 9 over 20. So we've been able to convert 45% to fraction. So if you got 45% in a test, it means you had 9 marks out of a total of 20 marks. That's just what it means. Okay, next question. Sorry guys, I'm in a hurry. I just have about 5 minutes left before I prepare for my class. 64%. So converting 64% to fraction, we do the same thing as we did in the previous example, 64 all over 100. So once we write that, we have already gotten a fraction. Next, we look for a number that can divide both 64 and 100. And the largest number that can divide both 64 and 100 is 4. 64 divided by 4 is going to give us 16. 100 divided by 4 is going to give us 25. So this means our answer is 16 all over 25. Okay. Can someone tell me the answer to C? Does anybody know the answer to C? What will be the answer to C? 22 all over 25. Okay. Is anybody confirming that? So if you want to watch any of my previous 22 over 25, correct? So if you want to confirm any of my previous, if you want to watch any of my previous classes that I've done, my live classes that I've done, you can simply go to my bio on TikTok, click the link on my bio. I have done a complete tutorial on indices and logarithm. So if you click my bio, you see options. One of the options is free lecture on indices and logarithm. So you can watch that free lecture. Though it's about a few hours. Just imagine we having live classes like this, and then about 4 of those. So an average of 40-35 minutes videos. You can go through them and you will learn all you need to know about indices. All you need to know about indices and logarithm. Also, by the end of this video, I'll put the link to my full lecture on fractions from the beginning of what we've been learning up till this point. So you can go watch it also. All of this is on my bio of my TikTok platform. So if you go to my TikTok platform, you'll see the link over there. If you click the link, you'll see the links to all those free courses. Okay, thanks guys. See you in the next class. My next live class will be by God's grace on Wednesday. I might come live on Tuesday, but for sure on Wednesday, that will be my next live class. So till then, have a wonderful evening and have a wonderful week ahead. Adios.